Hey, good afternoon. Scott Luton and Greg White with you here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's live stream. Greg, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I can't believe we are going to talk about this particular topic finally, but I'm really excited about this. This is a really cool partnership, and I think it's good for people to learn from.
Completely agree. We're going to be talking about a national procurement program, the hows, but more importantly, the whys behind these types of programs. So we've got a couple of business leaders that have stood up a very successful program. We're going to dive into that. They're going to be sharing their helpful perspectives. So stay tuned for what promises to be a very informative conversation that will elevate your supply chain IQ. And to top it all off, we've got one of our favorite repeat guests. So more on that in just a second. Quick programming note before we get started. If you enjoy our live stream episodes, be sure to check out our podcast and subscribe wherever you get those from. Today, Greg, we published a really neat recent episode from the Buzz from Monday where we talked a little about everything from hurricanes, unfortunately, and some of the developments we've seen there, through some of the interesting executive communication that's come out from some of our freight carriers to sales and marketing and supply chain, right?
Yeah. It's a great episode, and John Davis from Risk Pulse shared what they're doing to help companies get ready for what he called rapid intensification. This storm has done precisely what he said it would do. It's pretty impressive. It's like he's a weatherman and he knows what he's talking about.
He's only the chief meteorologist for Risk Pulse, but he knew his stuff, as Greg is saying. Absolutely. Check that out wherever you get your podcast from. Now, today's episode, again, we're going to dive in. It's all about procurement and strategic relationships and national procurement programs. Let's welcome in our featured guests. Jim Fechner, manager of packaging with USG. Good afternoon, Jim. How you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you with us here. I really enjoy the prep conversation and looking forward to sharing your expertise. And repeat guest extraordinaire, one of our popular guests from previous programming is Tyson Steffens, principal with the Pallet Alliance. Tyson, how you doing?
I'm doing great today. Thanks. Ready to go.
We are ready.
Person that can make pallets interesting.
I try.
So, this is going to be a really unique episode, and we're going to dive into the business behind it in a second. But let's do two things. First off, let's say hello to some of the folks that are tuned in. We've got Pratik via Facebook, Benjamin Goldklang, a regular around here via LinkedIn, Keith Smith via YouTube. Hello, Keith, Benjamin, and Pratik. And Amanda, of course, who's behind the scenes along with Clay, helping to quarterback the episode, the live stream here today. All right, so the second thing we want to do, Greg, is we want to kind of get to know both Jim and Tyson a little bit better before they start sharing all their secrets and their expertise, right?
Yeah, I mean, before they prove they've got a good partnership, let's find out who these two are.
That's right. So, Jim, let's start with you. Tell us a little about yourself, and then we'll talk about your role and USG in a moment.
Okay. I have been with USG for 30 years in about 3 weeks coming up. Also, but I have 35 years of procurement and sourcing experience. Whether it was with another company before this one, but pretty much my entire career has been with USG. I have been focusing on the packaging and paper area, including pallets, for probably the last 20 some years now.
Wow.
And we handle basically national supply agreements and sourcing for roughly, let's just say 40 some locations throughout US and Canada we're responsible for.
So is that that long tenured at USG? Is that part of the culture? Is that common?
It's pretty common. I would say it's a little less common today. Just I suppose there's probably various reasons why, but no. I mean, there's lots of folks that have been there for 20 plus years. And I'm one of them.
What an asset. Outstanding. Well, let's switch over to Tyson, Greg. So Tyson, it was great. It feels like it was 3 years ago, but beyond having you on a previous podcast, we also had a chance to rub elbows with you and your very busy exhibit at Modex, where the Pallet Alliance was there, and we had some fun. But That was just March. Can you believe that?
Yeah, it seems like it was a long time ago.
Light years ago. Well,
Yeah.
tell us. So you're in North Carolina now, but where are you?
That's right.
Where are you from? Let's refresh our audience. Where are you from, and tell us about the Pallet Alliance a little bit.
Okay, yep. Grew up in a small town in Ohio called Newton Falls. Went to school to be an engineer, and then actually went to US Gypsum. I was an engineer over there for about 5 years, and actually became acquainted with Jim Fechner and his buying programs before I actually physically met him. So that was interesting. And then, was looking for a little bit of a change. Got into pallets about 19 years ago. And a little over a year ago, with a couple of my coworkers, we purchased Pallet Alliance so that we now own it. And we're doing a lot of the same good basic work that Pallet Alliance had always done, kind of carrying that torch forward. We're just, kind of putting a few new angles on it and some throwing in a little fairy dust here and there.
But really, it's Pallet 4.0, a heavy dose of technology with a big part of your approach there, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right. So let's say hello, Greg. What are you going to say? Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to say hello to Keith Smith because he is from a company called Kelly, Kele, which was one of our early customers at Blue Ridge, a company I founded a long time ago. And it's good to see him, and he's watching us from YouTube. So
awesome.
Clearly doesn't spend all of his time on LinkedIn like the rest of us.
That's right.
Smart.
Keith, good afternoon.
Yeah, good to see you.
So before we pass the baton to Greg, and we're going to dive into this, I think what's going to be a really enlightening conversation around these national procurement programs. Let's say hello to Himanshu, who's tuned in via LinkedIn. Great to have you here. Sophia. So Sophia has been with us on several live streams.
Right.
Boy, does she make a splash with some of her summaries from the past webinars we've done and one of the live streams. So she's going to be Jim and Tyson. You'll have to be on your toes because Sophia will be looking and waiting for your expertise you're going to share here today. So Sophia,
right.
Great to have you.
He is a live stream reviewer, so you better be good.
That's right.
Gosh.
This is my first podcast too. So
Yeah. Can we start over?
You're doing
Finally,
great, Jim.
that's right. Y'all gonna be we're no concerns on our end. Finally, Syed, who we joined, he and his fellow podcast co-host in Pakistan a week or two ago. Syed, I hope this finds you well. Great to have you here via Facebook. And Christ Hatuba is tuned in via LinkedIn, so great to have you. All right, Greg, let's dive into this unique partnership they have here.
Yeah, we teased this a little bit at the beginning of the show, but some of the discussions we've had pre-show are really about the successful, the strong partnership that you all have built together, and a lot of the enthusiasm for the people that have come to this show, and we've heard a lot about it building up to today's show, is around how do you build a good procurement relationship? I mean, regardless of the product, which I have to admit, I'm fascinated by this whole topic of pallets. And we had this experience when you were on the podcast some while back, but I am fascinated by this partnership and what are the key elements that you've created here that make it such a successful partnership? You want to go, Jim?
Oh, you want me to discuss how we created it? You mean what generated it?
Let's talk about why you needed it to begin with, right? Let's start with that, and then how it works and what it's meant for your organization.
All right. Well, the why is it's relatively simple, but bottom line was that our plants were handling procurement of pallets themselves for many, many years. In fact, the first 10 years of my career with the USG, we did not manage pallets at all. So they were locally purchased. So we had just a local buyer who was responsible for making sure that particular plant got pallets when they needed them. And There was no standardization. There was no leverage. It was pretty much each guy get what they can. And if you're a procurement guy at a particular location, you're generally driven by cost. So every year, senior management at the plant would say, hey, we need our cost lowered. And so year after year after year, they would go after not only the pallet suppliers, but I'm sure others. But since Pallets was one of those fairly large spends that they were managing, they were constantly pushing the pallet suppliers to get costs down. And in that industry, if you're familiar with the industry at all, the more you push them and the more that they feel like they have to lower their price, they're going to do that for you, but they're also going to start cutting specifications, cutting corners, and before you know it, you got pallet problems all over the place. You got pallets that are not performing properly, they're the wrong size, maybe they got wrong deck boards, but we were having tons of problems out in the marketplace, and our very large retail customers, the big box guys, most people know them. There's two national ones and some fairly large regional ones. Were basically telling us that we had huge liability because we had pallets that were failing and product that was falling over, and so we needed to fix something real fast.
Hey Jim, if I can interrupt just for a second, do you believe bad pallets are huge issues? Do you believe most folks can appreciate that as much as some of the headaches that you were just sharing?
Well, I think everybody's got their own situation. I mean, there are certain manufacturers out there that may not necessarily need a high quality pallet. Maybe their product is very lightweight product, or in that particular case. But in general, yes, I think pallets are kind of overlooked in many locations. That a lot of companies just buy them because they're necessary, they're required. And don't really think about what the opportunities are there. Quite frankly, I was in that same boat. First 10 years of my career, I never once even considered a pallet, never even thought about it, and was told one day, you're going to run our pallet program. And I literally learned from scratch.
Well, what I love, and I'll interject one more time, Greg, if I can, is how Tyson talked about how Jim's reputation. He learned of his reputation before they even did business together. I mean, Jim, that's testimony to how fast of a learner and then applier that you were once they tapped you on the shoulder. I love that.
Well, and this is, what USG does is drywall. It is all at once one of the most durable products and at once one of the most delicate products as well, because as soon as it is compromised, it is toast, right?
Yep.
So I can see finally now, thanks to Tyson and he being on our third broadcast here, I can see the value in that. But I can tell you that I, like Jim and like some of the people he's described, when I was purchasing product, when I was in merchandising and supply chain and retail, I didn't give a tinker's damn about the pallets, right? But the truth is, and Tyson explained this to us, the truth is that has a lot to do with the deliverability and the quality of your products. So that's my soapbox about pallet. But I think it is. Your question, Scott, and to Jim's point, it is a bigger deal than people get, right?
Yeah.
And it's it's a big deal when Agent Orange and that other chain from North Carolina, when they say you've got a problem, that's when it really becomes a big deal.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times with the pallet too, because it is necessary, it's not something that a plant has an option for. There are costs associated with getting the product onto the pallet and out the door, and they never really dive in and consider those. So that's where a lot of the savings comes from.
Yeah. So Jim, share a little bit about, you shared why you needed to do it, but share a little bit about how you attack that problem. And this is probably, Tyson, where you guys will tag team a little bit.
Yeah, we probably can. I'd say, as I told you before, we got 40 some locations, and the vast majority of them use pallets. So, we basically internally, first of all, we gathered all of our data. Who's buying what where? What do they use? Where do they use it at? What types of sizes do they have? Who their suppliers were? That was our first attack because, I didn't even know who to really talk to be quite honest with you. So we gathered all that data, and we found that actually Pallet Alliance showed up in several of our locations already. So that obviously caught our attention. And then they weren't the only ones, to be honest with you. I mean, there's, when you do an RFP, you've obviously got to do your due diligence. But after talking to them and running some trials at one of our plants, we found very quickly that they were a solution. And I made a fairly large presentation to a huge group of people in the company, senior management, executives within USG. And after that, they said, let's sign the agreement, let's go. So it was pretty much right after that, we started going and attacking one by one, going after locations and looking for opportunities.
And I think one of the major differences in that process from what is typical is that, US Gypsum didn't just say, I want lower prices, get a smaller number in the box. They had a goal. They had an idea of what they wanted to achieve. We didn't act like a lot of standard brokers where we wanted to buy them the same exact thing and see if we could beat a vendor up to get it at a lower price. And there was a real, confluence of what they wanted, what we could get from the market for them, and we matched those two up. So at the end, they weren't left with a landscape that looked substantially the same, but for 2 cents less. They ended up with all of their plants having pallets redesigned, having standardization, and they saved money to boot.
I love that. Greg, we heard some of the feedback we got from Tyson's last interview with us was, I never knew there was that much to think about when it comes to pallets. And Tyson's illustrating, how Jim and the enterprise was being better served by a more customized, hey, let's really find out what you really need and really understanding that the gaps and the opportunities to elevate the performance, right?
Yeah, and I agree. And I think that's the mature approach, right, that Jim was able to take, that I think is part of the lesson here. Can't believe we're already the lessons at this point, but we are. I mean, part of the lesson here was solve the problem first, then worry about who does it, and then worry about at what cost, right? Because just the number 40, that's a big elephant to eat.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think there is some, it is nice that there were some vendors that were already working with multiple locations and that sort of thing. But Jim, tell us a little bit about, I'm curious about how you went about this process. I mean, did you first attack trying to unify the types of pallets that were used, or did you first focus on quality or first on vendor? How did you kind of attack that problem for 40 locations? Did you get all that, Jim?
I think we're having Murphy's Law is alive and well. So
yeah, sorry.
Can
you hear me now, guys?
Yeah, we got you.
Yeah, sorry. I got disconnected and I got back in a little bit. So again, I apologize.
That's pretty quick.
So you'll have to let me talk a little. Let me comment real quickly on what Tyson said a little before I got knocked off, and then ask your question again. So what he said is absolutely true. Our number one goal was not to save money. Now, that's not to say that that's not important. Obviously, as buyers, we are always tasked to source, competitive price and quality. But that was not our number one goal. Our number one goal was to make sure we standardized, improved our quality, had better service levels, all of these things. having formal specifications, which we didn't have prior to this. So all those things were our number one priority prior to a cost model. But as Tyson said, we achieved all of that and still saved money across the network.
Well, that was essentially my question. So you are sage.
Oh, sorry.
And I think that's a big point of, like you said, he achieved all of his goals and saved the money. Is, what we tend to tell people is that, a pallet costs what it costs. It's made out of wooden nails. Everybody builds it about the same way. There's only so much you can do with that. The savings is really in your plan and your setup. It's in the standardization. It's in the redundancy between plants, the resiliency that you build into the pallet supply chain. Because at the end of the day, that pallet is going to cost about the same from every good buyer out there. It's what did you do behind the scenes to set up the structure and the program. That's where the money's at.
Love that. Hey, Greg, let me say hello to a few folks. By the way, Benjamin Goldklang just said, "Who knew the world of pallets was this in depth? Supply chain IQ is raised." Love that.
I didn't either, Benjamin, and I had the same kind of reaction that you did. Right.
Hey, real quick, want to say hello to Davin, who's also tuned in via LinkedIn Live. Our dear friend John Buglino is tuned in via LinkedIn. Great to see you here, John. Rahul, Marie Hurst is tuned in via LinkedIn. Great to have you back with us, Marie. And of course, our Jam King or Queen, Sylvia from Charleston, South Carolina, who use old pallets for, it looks like, repurposing them in our garden. So great to have all of you. And let me put one more question out there. So we're talking about national procurement programs, successful national procurement programs. This one happens to focus on pallets. But to our audience, if y'all have been a part of those national enterprise-wide programs, drop some comments in there and we'll get your take too. All right, Greg, let's keep driving into this relationship.
Yeah, I'd love to get your perspective, Tyson, from the outside, sort of looking in. I mean, you were only working with a few of the facilities. Tell us what you found when you got there and how you addressed the problem with Jim, and how did you get it to where it is today?
I think, the situation with USG in terms of what their situation was pretty typical. And like Jim said, usually people at the local level are buying pallets, and that's not their specialty. Their specialty is doing something else. This is just something they have to do. Sometimes it's a buyer, sometimes it's a foreman, whatnot. And they're really reliant on a local pallet supplier who may or may not know really what is needed. The other danger is that local pallet supplier is only going to offer solutions that they can build, right? If they're a softwood manufacturer, they're not going to offer you a hardwood solution. If they build new pallets, they're not going to offer you a remanufactured pallet. And so what you often find is there were problems in the past, and the first step at that solution was the wrong step. But then you keep following those steps and you've taken the left fork in the road when you should have taken the right. And now you're way far down the rabbit hole. You can't even kind of see where you've been. And so that was the situation, I would say, at most of the plants and what we typically find. And that's where we're kind of backing everything out, evaluating everything from a fresh standpoint. And that's why we kind of act like a specialized buyer / cross-functional operations group and start at, okay, listen, what are you shipping? What are your goals? What is it that you need to achieve? And then let us apply our expertise and our knowledge of what the pallet industry can actually provide you reliably and come up with several different options and several different plans. And sometimes optimization is a very big goal for a company. Sometimes it's reduction of SKUs, incorporating multiple pallets on one footprint. Whatever that is that they need, that's what we need to know up front. And then we can go in and do it. And a lot of that is actually going to the customer site, talking to the operators that use the pallets every day, and really asking them, because they're the people that know what works and what doesn't work. They're the people that have to buy into the solution. And that's one of the nice things, working with US Gypsum. And like, if you go to a plant with Jim, he works in a tower in Chicago, but you can go to Oklahoma and he knows 5 of the guys on forklifts by first name, and they're actually happy to see him, which makes my job makes my job a lot easier. I haven't caught him paying them off before we get there yet, but I'm still looking for it. And
that's called Venmo.
And I thought he was texting on the way to the plant.
There you go.
And and really a big part of what we do is that on the ground presence. Not everybody that works in our space makes the trip. Talking to the operator, being willing to ask the operator, hey, what do you want? What if I did this? Do you think that would work? And working through that process with them to try to get buy-in up and down the chain as much as possible.
Yeah. So we've got our first question, Greg, but I don't want to. I know you've got a follow-up comment there, so I'll hold.
Yeah, Jim, I'm just curious because it sounds like that was almost a consulting as well as a product provision process. I mean, how much interaction was there? I mean, with your team and with Tyson's team to kind of put this program together? It sounds pretty significant.
Oh, it was very collaborative. There's no doubt about that. And we certainly included, when we went to a location, the plant manager was aware that we were there. The operations manager was there. Like Tyson said, we'd go down and talk to the foreman. I mean, they were included in every step of the process, as well as part of the decision-making process to make sure that they're part of the solution as well. So I'm very careful about trying to come across as a dictator, like a lot of corporate buyers. They'll sit in the ivory tower, like Tyson said, and they'll basically just cut a deal and then call the plant or call the operations guy and say, okay, here's what you're doing. Yep. No explanation why, no involvement, no understanding of what it is. They just generally just tell them what to do. And that is absolutely not our style whatsoever. So we definitely include them in all of these decisions. They have a voice. They may not always get what they want, and sometimes we may not always get what we want. But at the end of the day, we get what the company needs.
Well put.
Thank you. These guys are dropping major knowledge on us, Scott. Shall we hit them with Jeff's question?
Yeah, this
is going to be a good one, fellas, because it's coming from Jeff Miller, so get ready.
Yes, Jeff is one of our resident sages of these live streams, along with Sophia and Benjamin and Stefan. Mao is not here with us here today, but all right. So there's a lot of interest, it seems, in this pallet life cycle. So Jeff says, "Hey, can you discuss pallet life cycle planning with the ability today to cost effectively monitor, track, and trace pallets? Do you manage them more like longer lived equipment, or do you still consider them as more as indirect material or consumables?"
I would say that the answer to that is, with all good questions in life, it depends. So I think more and more we are trying to consider them as longer lived assets. It really depends on the supply chain and the ability to exercise reverse logistics on it. So there are some situations where there is no feasible way to capture or get that pallet back. So in that situation, what we do is we design the pallet to have as little wood fiber as possible in it. Now, the good thing about the pallet industry is once that pallet has been used, it's not going to get thrown in the dumpster. It's going to go to a pallet recycler who's going to reuse it, or they're going to break it down into components, re-nail the components, use it again, grind it into mulch, animal bedding. It will have another life. Now, in a situation where we can take care of reverse logistics, then we will try to recapture and reuse those pallets. And we have programs where we do one-way pallets, and we rely on the pallet recycling community to provide that second life. We've got customers where they have a much more closed loop situation where we can get those pallets back, and we actually operate a giant kind of sort and repair private pool situation to maximize the life of the pallets. And, recently we've gotten into digital pallet tracking with IntelliPallet, where we can use a variety of technologies to track a pallet, its environmental conditions at the time. And so that's starting to come to the forefront also.
And you do have the pallets that are enabled for track and trace, right, Tyson?
Yes, we do. We use several different technologies. We can track and trace with cellular, Bluetooth, LoRa, Sigfox. Those devices can be enabled with temperature, humidity, shock sensing, GPS if we need it. So there are a variety of different methods you can use to solve a variety of use cases. And each one really needs to be dialed into what data does the customer need from this pallet and this unit load.
Got it. So Scott alluded to this a little bit earlier, and I'm curious, particularly from your perspective, Jim, when you think about national or even global procurement programs, what lessons should our audience take away from this that apply to a procurement program regardless of what the product or regardless of who the partner is? I mean, I can think of a few, but I'd love to hear what your thoughts are.
Well, I mean, I think one thing that could apply to almost anything is that no matter how long you've had a program in place, there's always opportunity to keep looking for reductions, optimization, improvement. I can give you a couple of examples specifically to what we're doing today with Pallet Alliance on the pallet side that examine that, because we're coming up on 20 years next year doing business with these folks. So one would naturally think, oh, this thing is just kind of on autopilot. There's nothing more to do, but there's constant evolution. I'll give you one quick example. We've got a particular product that's been going on the same size pallet for close to 20 years. But over the past several years, we've actually begun implementing a lot of automation as far as stacking product onto our pallets. And what that's basically created is an opportunity for us to use a smaller size pallet, because the automation actually allows for better and improved stacking on the pallet. And so we are getting close right now to implementing this across the network, where we have all of our plants transitioning to a smaller pallet, and smaller means less wood, and that means lower cost. Mm-hmm. So that's one example I could give you. Another one would be a real quick one is, we acquired a new company out in California. Several years back, we began an operation where we were looking to resolve some of the problems they were having. And this operation happened to be building their own pallets 100% right on site. Wow. These are folks that obviously are not professional pallet builders. And they were basically building one style pallet all day long, no matter what was going on the pallet, no matter what size it was. And Tyson and I spent a couple of weeks out there visiting, understanding what they're doing. And we began a process of implementation where they are now buying pre-made pallets for them. And we're looking at savings that is heavy double digits for that plant in savings, just by removing that operation and having them delivered a professionally built pallet that works, for the application.
Yeah. And I think from the supplier side, one thing I would add in there too is one of the great things about having a program where there's longevity is, from the Pallet Alliance side, we've always invested a lot of time and effort into USG. And the reason we can do that is because we know that it's a partnership. So for instance, like Jim said, we've spent a couple weeks out there. You can't spend a couple weeks. You can't spend that kind of time and money on a customer that might be here today and gone tomorrow and buys at a couple plants, but not at a couple others. And, part of that process to get the pallet that we wanted, the pallet manufacturers that we wanted to use couldn't get the nails that were needed to technically make the pallet possible. So we turned around and started sourcing the nails for it also. I can't ask people on our team to spend that kind of time to resource nails for a customer that, might hang around, might not, might be committed, might not be. But because we know that, as long as we're doing the right job and a good job for US Gypsum, that they're going to be a good partner, we go ahead and we can pay those things forward whenever the opportunity comes up.
Mm.
Yeah, it's hard to justify that the kind of commitment that you all have made if somebody really only cares about the price. I mean, if there's one, there are two takeaways that I see here. One is it can't be just about the price. And I know we say that all the time when talking about procurement, but it has to be about the solution first.
Yeah.
Right.
Well put.
And the other, go ahead, Jim.
Well, I was going to say was that I know we made that comment earlier that price was not our number one driver. Like I said before, it doesn't mean that it's not important. And in fact, over the 20 years that we've been doing business with Pallet Alliance, we have conducted RFPs more than once just to make sure that we are priced competitively. And guess what? In all those cases, they are more than competitive with what any other company out there could offer us. So we know that we are priced competitively because we are doing our due diligence and validating where we're at in the marketplace. So again, that tells you that you can buy from a program manager and still be competitive. And on top of that, improve your quality and service levels.
And the evolution of your relationship has been so powerful to me. It seems like, Jim, that Tyson is still working hard to give you what you want and to continually explore with you how that evolution of your business is occurring. And it's obvious here because I can't think of a single time that we've had both a supplier and a procurement manager on the show at once. It's obvious that you have at least fairly transparent relationship, right? That you are sharing needs and abilities with one another that, create some vulnerabilities in the relationship that you both need to be aware of and sensitive to.
Yeah.
Excellent observation. All right. We've got a lot more interest in this, not only the relationship, but also the pallets. So, and Tyson, this was to be expected based on the feedback we had, on your earlier appearances. So Sophia asks, for the smart pallets and other alternatives you mentioned, Tyson, what are some of the main challenges you face to implement these solutions?
I would say that right now, the main challenge in implementing that solution is that it's a product that's never really been available before. So many people that could gain a lot of benefit from it don't actually know that it's available yet. Also, a lot of them don't know fully how to optimize the result for themselves. So also, before the pallet industry is heavily focused on the collaboration of buyers and operations folks, where the IntelliPallet is more of an appeal to a CIO or some sort of information technology director. And those aren't typically bridges that we see a lot, where we see a lot of CIOs hanging out with the manufacturing folks, where the buyers and the manufacturers are more often seen in the same company. So it's one of those items where we really need the imagination of the CIO. And we need that person that can see the magic in it for themselves, because I think that data that you can pull off of the pallet, there's so much potential in it that I'll never tell the customer the absolute best thing they can do with that. We can give them examples and we can try to stimulate their imagination, but it's going to be the CIOs and the people within the company that say, you know what, guys, you can stop there. If you can get me these pieces of data, boy, do I have a plan for this? To where we just say, great, let's figure out how to get this done. So from a physical standpoint of deploying it, Not too big of a problem. The biggest hurdle is just igniting the imagination of people to determine what the potential is for them.
Excellent. So, Jim, I'll give you a chance to piggyback on anything that Tyson just shared there, because we've got one other question that Juliana really wants us to pose. Jim, any additional comments on what Tyson just shared?
No, I think he's accurate. I mean, I don't have a lot of experience in the tracing part of it. We don't. It doesn't necessarily apply to our business per se. We do have a return program in our Canadian operations, but we don't do that at all in the U.S. I don't have anything more to add to that. I think he's spot on.
Fair enough.
Quick question before we do ask Juliana's question, which we better ask apparently. So, if your CIO, Jim, went to the mythical plant in Oklahoma, would 4 of 5 forklift drivers know him or her?
That is a really good question.
I think the point is made, right? I mean, you are so much more connected to the operations of the business, right? And that is a big part of the hurdle for some of this technology, is that so many people that are in and do stay, Jim, in the ivory tower, right, in the corporate office, they don't know exactly how the product is being used at ground level, right? All right, let's ask Juliana's question.
All right. So, hey, by the way, good afternoon, Juliana. Great to have you here with us via LinkedIn. So she wants to know, does cutting the cost not call for a decrease in the quality of the pallet, or is it's pallets, so quality isn't a problem? So Tyson, I bet you've gotten this question.
I'm fine. I'm fine. We can
Take
keep
a
going.
deep breath, Tyson.
Great question, Juliana.
Yeah, good question.
I feel like I just got my heart stomped on a little bit. I'll make it. Go on without me. Save yourselves. No, oftentimes, and really where the meat of our programs are, and this was what took place in US Gypsum, is that through redesign, we're able to bring wood fiber out of the pallet by using the wood fiber that is in the pallet properly. And this comes down to it's a lot of basic mechanical engineering, wood science, and that's picking the right materials in the right dimensions to do the job that needs to be done. And I would equate it maybe something that's more applicable for a lot of people is, we see bicycles now. Bicycles are so much lighter now than they were. And basically an $800 bicycle today would way outperform a $3,000 bicycle from 10 years ago. And it's really about better materials used in a more efficient manner. So no, we can decrease wood consumption often and maintain the quality of the operation of the pallet. And yes, the quality of the pallets does matter. And think of Jim's product, 50-pound, 5-gallon pails of joint treatment in a rack at Home Depot. If that pallet breaks and those pails fall down, that's a serious safety concern. It's a safety concern for his employees in the plant. And from a monetary standpoint, every pail that gets damaged on the way to market is a lost opportunity. So,
yeah.
Great answer.
And I could piggyback on that too, because again, a lot of times folks that are not pallet experts or really don't understand pallets, for instance, we had many situations where a plant was buying a particular pallet size, and they always think that, the thicker the lumber, the better it is. So they would wind up with a pallet that had, for instance, heavy top deck boards, but spread way far apart because they couldn't afford to buy a pallet across the deck. We basically would come into some of these locations, redesign them, and they'd have, instead of I'll just use it for an example, 11/16 board and we would switch that into a full half inch, but spread it across the entire deck. And that pallet actually performed better than the original one, but just an untrained eye, a guy would look at that and go, well, that pallet's cheaper. That's not going to work. It's going to fail. And in fact, we've proven that not only does it, match, but it's better. It's actually better. We have a lot less problems with it.
So one of the other things that often can reduce cost without reducing quality is economies of scale. And instead of 40 locations sourcing independently, now you have 40 locations sourcing centrally, or probably most of them, and probably for most of their pallets. Did that come into play in substantial measure in terms of cost savings without impacting quality?
Oh, I would say for sure. And not only that, was we would really work hard at trying to use standard cuts in the marketplace. And Tyson could talk a little bit more about that. But the more you standardize your pallet dimensions to what's readily available in the market, that's less extra cutting and extra processing that a pallet mill needs to do. And when you do that, that reduces cost. So that comes right to the bottom line.
Yep. Yeah, that reduces cost. And also what it does is it makes more manufacturing locations possible sources, which increases competition when we go out to buy for US gypsum, as well as that's also something that kind of runs in the background for us, where by doing that, we're actually de-risking their supply chain as well, because what we've done is we've standardized several plants up and down the East Coast, for instance, on one of their high volume pallets. So should there be a fire at a pallet shop somewhere in Georgia, we can actually immediately turn around and divert pallets from New Jersey down there. And we don't need to call anybody to ask them if they'll work. The people, down there don't need to wonder about it. We know, we have the design. We know what machines they have. We know how their machines operate. And we know that this pallet will run on that machine. Ship it.
Love it. So we blink and we're almost at the top of the hour, and there's so much more to this relationship. If we could, as we kind of move into wrapping up with Jim and Tyson here, can y'all both just share, if folks are looking to establish this forward-looking relationship, national procurement program like y'all clearly done here, and Jim, sounds like it's central to your approach in general. Give us a tip or two, whether you're speaking to the shippers, so to speak, or the suppliers. What's a key thing to keep in mind as they look to stand up similar programs? And Jim, let's start with you.
Well, I think there are a few key things that I would suggest. And number one, really understand the commodity. Understand how you use it, how it applies to your operation, not only from an operational standpoint, but from a cost standpoint. Really get a good baseline of data so you understand where you're benchmarked at. And then do your due diligence and assess what's available out there. And that's not, and again, we keep going back to price, but don't just look at price. Look at what these guys can offer you as far as an overall program, whether it's packaging or pallets or whatever. But you've really got to know what's driving your operations and what's going to drive your cost to where they meet your budgetary needs.
Great stuff there, Jim. Tyson, what would you say?
Yeah, I think one of the main things for us is, we're looking for good customers, just like good customers are looking for good partners, And I think one of the important things for our clients with us is what helps us do the best job for them is, kind of like Jim, where they're very straightforward. They're very open about what it is that they need to try to accomplish and let us figure out how to get there. I always equate it to, if they cart me into the hospital and they're about to operate, I'm not going to tell the doctor how I'd like the operation to proceed. They're the expert. I'm here to benefit from your expertise. And that's what Jim will do. He'll say, hey, I've got a plant or I've got a product this is what we want to accomplish in the end. Within a week, can you get back to me with a plan on how to best do this from the pallet side? And, he answers questions. And so that's the main thing I would say is look for people where you can have two-way discussions. You can share information back and forth and use each other as a resource to move forward together. It's not a one-way street.
Love that, man. All right, so want to say hello to a few folks. Kevin, we're not going to be able to get to your question here as we're wrapping up this interview, but great question about economies of scale for small batch manufacturing. Hope White, great to have you here via Facebook. And I love that there's some David and Juliana are kind of talking about some of the things in the comments that Jim and Tyson, both of you've spoken to. So no shortage of passion in this live stream. All right, so Greg, a lot of good stuff. Jim, how can folks connect with you and learn more about USG?
I am on LinkedIn. I am also on Facebook, but LinkedIn is probably the best way to connect to me. And of course, my email is pretty straightforward. It's my first initial, last name at usg.com. So those would probably be the best ways to reach out to me. Outstanding.
Straightforward. All right, Tyson. When you're not sleeping in booths at Modex, but we said to our audience, we had,
it makes me sound like such a hobo.
We'll post that picture.
Yeah, that's right. I should add a little color commentary. So Tyson was messing with us a little bit, and as we all left our booths at Modex, he snuck into our traveling studio and took some snapshots. Had a lot of good fun with that social media. All right, so Tyson, how can they connect with you and the powerful team at the Pallet Alliance?
The best way is they can email me at tyson@tpai.com, or they can visit our website at www.tpai.com.
It is just that simple. Jim. Tyson and Jim, I mean, really not taking anything away, because it's really tough to find the right partner that you got. That there's so much, I mean, what we heard here today, so many kindred spirits on how you view these types of strategic relationships, and to stand it up and then for it to be still delivering, 20 years later, as Jim put it, not on autopilot, but it's delivering in a true bottom line fashion. It's testimony. We'll have to have y'all back as we dive a little deeper next go around. But thanks so much to Jim Fechner, manager packaging with USG, and of course our dear friend Tyson Steffens, principal with the Pallet Alliance. Y'all have a great afternoon, and we'll talk with you soon.
Yeah, well done.
Thank you.
Take care.
Man, well, Greg, we had a hunch that this interview here and this conversation was going to stir up, comments and questions and really passion from our audience, because it's just it. Even though we were talking in a broader sense about these enterprise-wide procurement programs, the focus of this one about pallets is just something so many folks just don't think about. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think there were a lot of lessons here. One is that you can say stimulate the imagination and pallet in the same sentence. I don't know if everyone caught that, but Tyson actually said that they attempt to stimulate the imagination of their customers on how to solve the problem. The other, I think the big lesson here, the procurement lesson, is no one can make you do anything. And therefore the transparency, the openness, the collaboration, the partnership that those two people showed in their relationship that has lasted 20 years in procurement. That to me is the number one lesson, is that transparency and trust and collaboration, even vulnerability is important in those relationships. And the reason that it's safe to do that is because you have one word in your vocabulary that allows you to do that. And that word is no. If it ever doesn't work for you, you can say no. No one can make you take a particular deal. And that's a lesson that I think, it's a very simple concept, but I think that's a lesson that sometimes we need to get back to basics. Yeah. Think about how we build these relationships and why it's not dangerous to do so.
Well put. I love, again, I go back. I love how Jim's got a reputation for putting these types of great win-win. I hate that's cliche, and these types of relationships aren't cliche, but that really is what it is.
Yeah.
And he sounds like maybe he can write a book at some point after 30 years at USG. Holy cow. All right. So as much as we love that conversation, we're going to have to start to wind today's live stream down. Love all the great questions and the comments from, that they keep coming. I love Sophia came, new hashtag pallet lovers. Love that. All right. So, but we have got to pay the bills here at Supply Chain Now, and we've got a couple of great events that we want to make sure our audience is aware of, right? So,
well, this is a great event. First of all, because Six River Systems is one of the big players in the industry, and they're bringing on folks from Shopify, which is the biggest, a $120 billion company. So,
well, I can't tee it up any better than that, other than Flow. In this case, Flow 2020 is all about the future of logistics, operations, and warehousing. As Greg mentioned, Six River Systems, it's their users conference, and it's free. There's no charge to attend. It covers it's 2 days in September. It is smart, Greg. Groups like this, they're willing to give back and give folks a chance during challenging times to develop and grab market intel and network a bit and get better at what they do, more informed at what they do. So we've got the link to sign up in our show notes. Y'all check that out. As Greg mentioned, it's great keynotes, including a couple senior leaders with both Six River Systems and Shopify, the dominant player in the market. So y'all check that out, September 16th through the 17th. And then, Greg, we've got a new one, right, from our dear old friends at Reuters Events.
Yeah. So the Supply Chain USA, this year it's virtual. Usually it's in Chicago. Would love to have dropped by Jim's place and have him take us out for a Gino's East pizza. But we're going to have to do it virtually. Maybe he can send it to us on dry ice. But this is a great organization. Incredible speakers. You know, when I say incredible speakers, I'm going to start with number one in my book, and that's Sandra Mcquillen. The EVP and Chief Supply Chain Officer at Mondelez. She's been on the show a couple times. Unbelievable talent in terms of supply chain, inspirational. We're going to be speaking, and of course we're going to be talking with the CEO of Arlo Foods, which is a Danish company in Northern Europe that is a co-op doing some amazing things, and always interesting to hear from what people love to call affectionately the shipper side, right? People who are making and delivering and selling the products. So,
this thing is packed with keynotes. Greg Lemkel, which we talked about, Lineage Logistics on one of the last buzzes. They're the dominant player in cold chain, which is an absolute critical component of global supply chain, especially in the years to come.
Yankee from Tractor Supply, who's got explosive growth right now. You can't throw a dead cat and not hit either a Tractor Supply store or one that's being built.
You always can rely on Greg White for putting it in a colorful visual manner. I love that, Greg. But yeah, y'all check it out. They're offering a complimentary taster pass, and I'm not exactly sure all the ins and outs there, but we've got the direct link in our show notes. And some folks have already been jumping on there and taking advantage of that free pass or whatever version of that. So check that event out. And that's going to be coming to you 7th and the 8th of October. So you got some time there.
Yeah.
All right, Greg, great show. We're partial. Tyson's a great friend. We got so much great feedback on his earlier appearances. We knew that him and Jim on today's live stream would bring it. I love the questions we got from the audience. It really helped accentuate some different nuances of their partnership, right?
I'm with Jeff Miller. That was cool. And with Ben, how could that possibly be cool, right? We were talking about pallets and procurement, and I think if we have done anything this week that should have raised people's supply chain IQ, this should be it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of practical knowledge there. It was real life from both sides of the relationship, which is fantastic because when you got them both in the room, it's not just lip service. It actually had to occur because we didn't see Tyson go, really? So you know that it's really happening, and you can see that the way those two gentlemen interact with one another, that it is a very successful relationship, and you can always learn from that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm with you. And Amanda says she had no idea that pallet technology was actually a thing. Always learning.
Another hashtag, right?
Love that.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, and when Tyson was messing around and he grabbed his heart, I loved it. We had a comment. Someone grabbed the defib. We need to have a defib on these live streams, Greg.
Well, maybe for you when I say something, yes.
That's right. Hey, I'm just glad to be alive and kicking after Monday's buzz, where we had a lot of interesting back and forth.
No kidding.
With all that said, hopefully our audience enjoyed this show as much as we did. Really, to see Jim and Tyson talk about the relationship that's endured 20 years, there's so much takeaway. And while pallets, of course, are important, there's so much takeaway, universal takeaway across other relationships. So, Greg, it is a challenging time, but we're going to sign off like we always do. And we're constantly challenging ourselves. Hey, do good, give forward, and be the change that's needed. And with all that said, we'll see you next time here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.